We're back. This is the Lady Brain Show. We're Steph and Lauren, and with us in studio right now is Tegan Hoffmann. She is the principal at Blue Earth Consultants, and they are a group that specializes in developing sustainable solutions to complex land and sea issues, which is how Lauren and I could understand it. Tegan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Well, it is. I mean, Earth Day is basically, it's this weekend. It's upon us, so it seemed timely to talk to someone who actually knows what's going on with the Earth.
Yeah.
So what does Blue Earth Consultants do? What do you mostly focus on?
Well, we focus on, as you can tell, the name Blue Earth, which is blue. The ocean is blue. The Earth is blue. 70% of the Earth is blue. And so it's been generally an area, an ecosystem that's been neglected. And we do a lot of work on management on coastal issues and ocean issues and those connections with the land. And we work a lot with foundations, people who give money to help conserve the ocean. And we work with governments, and we work sometimes with the private sector. And, you know, we help them try and protect the ocean, be more effective.
What goes into that?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's kind of sometimes a lot of research and writing, and sometimes we help people. We're kind of behind the scenes. And so, you know, you don't really hear about us because we're helping some pretty visible people do their job better. And so sometimes, for example, when there was the Gulf of Mexico spill, we, for the oil spill, we actually helped write testimony for someone and did all the research and the writing and the testimony for that person to, you know, talk in front of the Senate Committee of Natural Resources. So, we, you know, we do research writing. We help do strategies and plans for a foundation on how to maybe spend $10 or $20 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And sometimes we work with the government agencies, and we'll help them figure out how they can get more stakeholder buy-in and support into a process that might, you know, be to protect the coast of California and create new protected areas for the ocean.
So can you give us an example, like something that, other than those amazing examples you just gave, like I wrote a testimony for someone to appear in front of the Senate over the oil spill in the Gulf. I mean, that's major. But can you kind of describe maybe a program that you've actually executed?
Yeah. So, well, we don't often do the implementation of the work. We're maybe more helping with the startup and or the review of it. So, for example, there's this family, and they have a son who loves the ocean, and he got his PhD at Duke, and each kid kind of has their own passion, and they've created a family foundation, and they've invested a lot of money in partnership with the country of Belize. And so they hired us to actually look back at how they spent their money on marine protection with the partnership with the government of Belize, and they asked us to say, you know, how effective has this been? What should we do differently? How should we spend our money differently? And they spent about $20 million in a few years, and so we gave them some advice. We went there, we talked to all the government officials, the stakeholders, the managers, and we, you know, made some recommendations on how they could be better partners and philanthropists.
And then you hand it over to people who actually make it happen.
Yeah.
But you lay all the groundwork, you do all the heavy lifting that's, like you said, behind the scenes and say, here's what you need to do.
Right.
These people are all on board. No. Take that $20 million and do something good in Belize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, another thing that we did was we worked with Fondo Mexicano. We do a lot of international work as well as domestic work. But we did this project with Fondo Mexicano, which is the Mexican Conservation Nature Fund. And so their whole goal is to create financing, like money to actually protect and manage the protected areas in Mexico. And so we worked with them, helping them set up an endowment for the Gulf of California protected areas. And we helped negotiate seed funding from a lot of actually California foundations who put money in and help them figure out what would be the amount of money they needed, and then what would be the goals of the fund, how they would spend it, you know, the flows of the fund to the protected area managers, and then we actually help them raise more funds.
So do you ever get into policy work? I mean, so it sounds like a lot of the philanthropy that you're helping support and strategize around is solving problems that are there. But do you get into any of the work around preventing problems before they even begin?
Yeah, sometimes. We don't do a lot of policy. We're kind of, what are the next best practices that are evolving? So we're not looking at like current regulation, but we often will work with, a government, or I can give an example in California where the Obama administration passed in 2010 the National Ocean Policy, and it's basically requiring each of the states and the federal government to create a land use plan for the ocean. And it's kind of, the ocean is like this next big, territory of exploration and use. And there's a lot of emerging uses right now. There's like open ocean aquaculture. There's alternative ocean energy. There's desal, so there's going to be all these conflicts over the space. And so the state of California hired us to help them think through how would they lay out kind of the plan to implement coastal marine spatial planning for the state. What are the current kind of assets and liabilities for the state, and how would they go about, actually implementing it? Because right now with the ocean and coastal issues, you have all these different government agencies, and they all cross jurisdictions, and nobody actually manages the ocean and the coast, one entity. It's like all these different groups. And so, they hired us to help them think through that strategy and line up maybe some, steps in that process. And some of those will become new policies.
Wow.
It's so interesting. And what about, it seems like with the ocean, unlike land, is something that is constantly moving, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, all this detritus, whatever, from the earthquake in Japan is starting now to float up on shore in the northwestern coast. So do you ever get into issues around that? I mean, that must affect decisions.
In fact, we just did a piece of work. They asked us to explore different opportunities for them to potentially invest in coastal and ocean conservation. And one of the areas we looked at about 20, and who knows if they'll even invest anything in coastal and ocean conservation. But we did look at marine debris, and it is so complicated. I mean, it is so much more complicated than we ever imagined, because you have these big garbage patches that of kind of gyres in each ocean that has gotten all these plastics from all over the world in these kind of centers. And this is a perfect example with the Japanese tsunami, where it's moved, the ships have moved, and all the debris has moved over to the California current. And so
it just follows the ships over.
It just follows the currents. And so, we've looked into that. We looked into some solutions, and some of the solutions are understanding how plastics and debris move and it sinks, and then how do you actually collect it? How do you remove it? What are the policies? Because every country is different and has different laws, but California just is pretty progressive, and the West Coast governors are pretty progressive too, and they've been actually trying to create a marine debris atlas and have a baseline and set some laws around plastic bags and other issues.
Wow. I mean, it's not something you put a diving mask on and just go grab it. Like it's a little bit more involved.
So in our last minute or so with you, if we're not as deep into the ocean as you are and your colleagues are, what can an individual, no pun intended, what could an individual do to keep our oceans happy?
Well, I mean, I think, the best thing that you can do is be an advocate, maybe write to your policymakers about that you care, that you want to protect them. Because not everyone does. There's a lot of stakeholders, fishermen, recreational fishermen, who are against protection, and we need to protect, especially with climate change. And so have a voice. And also, if you're a shareholder, or have a voice with companies that you invest in your mutual fund, start paying attention, because, I could say like, recycle, compost, but let's make bigger change. We've got to go to the heart of these issues. We need to get, regulation that's empowering, ocean conservation and has an impact, and also changing business practice.
Fabulous.